here, Dr. Cole. It's been a while. I've been looking for you, actually trying to get you on here. So I can't believe that this is the first time of all the heretical doctors I've had on that you haven't been on before. So anyway, my apologies for being long overdue on the invitation. Statement of charges served on physician license of Ryan Cole by the Washington Medical Commission. My first thought was, this is weird because I know that you're in Idaho. Why is the Washington Medical Commission concerned about what you're doing? So I have that as my first question, on top of basically this is very quick, the statement of charges. I mean, I could just read it real fast so everybody knows. January 2023, Washington Medical Commission issued a statement of charges against the Washington physician license of Ryan Cole, MD. Dr. Cole resides in Idaho, but holds a Washington license to practice as a physician and surgeon. The statement of charges alleges that Dr. Cole made numerous false and misleading statements about or related to COVID-19 and treated patients with COVID-19 or seeking to prevent getting COVID-19 in a manner that was beneath the standard of care. Dr. Cole must file a response to the statement of charges by January 30th, 2023. And here they say what a lot of the big press says. They have, and maybe, they're going to talk about it in detail in the legal documents, but here it's just those catchphrases, misleading statements, beneath the standard of care. And I think a lot of the people who follow me, if they've been paying attention to doctors, realize that it's often these licensing commissions and the people getting the mouthpiece that are actually the ones making false and misleading statements about all this stuff. And maybe that's why they don't qualify it, because it's like, they don't want you to know. I don't know. Anyway, my opening question is, why does the Washington Medical Commission care about a doctor in Idaho?
Technically, they care about anybody that has a license in their state. And so I run a busy medical laboratory. I trained at Mayo Clinic. I've seen 500,000 patients in my career, et cetera, board certified pathologist. But since I do consult expert work from around the country, wherever I do have clients, I get a license in that state, just to be honorable and say, a lot of states require it. If you're doing pathology or radiology from another state, technically you are seeing a patient, even though you're seeing a part of the patient in biopsy and whatnot. So, I got my Washington license years ago, just trying to do the honorable thing, licensed to practice in Washington. Why did they attack me? Well, as many know, I've been very vocal in terms of having a scientific point of view on everything that happened during COVID. It doesn't happen to align with their point of view. But really, the impetus for all of these complaints is really one rotten human being. And his name is Dr. David Pate. He's the CEO of a local medical system here in Boise, Idaho. Former CEO. I think he stepped down after last year. But he didn't like what I was saying. So he took it upon himself to have a one-man vendetta. Granted, this guy never saw a COVID patient, doesn't practice medicine anymore. He's an administrator. I've sat down, met with him a couple times. He doesn't know squat about basic science, let alone biochemical mechanisms, et cetera, et cetera. So because I was speaking out, he decided he was going to file a complaint against my license in every state where I was licensed. He filed a complaint with the College of American Pathologists to get my fellowship taken away. He filed a complaint with the American Board of Pathology to enjoin him to attack me in all these states as well for, those quote misleading, misdismal, and from all the things that you listed. So it's really crazy that in this day and age of lawfare, I mean, this is the administrative state. This is these courts are judge, jury, and executioner. There's really no constitutional construct or principle within these administrative law courts or administrative procedure. So it's really been a bizarro process, basically induced by one guy that doesn't like me because he was unwilling to have public debate about COVID.
But even if you had somebody like that, no offense to Chihuahuas, but this sounds like Chihuahua doctor behavior, like just nipping at your little ankles, just trying to get you down. But even if you had that, if you didn't have a licensing commission that feels like it is able to go after doctors for whatever they say, I mean, this is really starting to those of us watching from home who actually are paying attention and think that there is a constitution and a doctor-patient relationship that should be protected. This is very bewildering that you can have a licensing commission come after a doctor for what he's saying on a podcast and take his license away for that.
Well, and that's the dystopian aspect of this is in hearings, their declaration is that anytime I speak publicly, I am practicing medicine. So I just, having served in the military, having been to all the historical sites growing up in the DC area, reading all of our founding documents, I don't recall reading those documents, insert sarcasm here, where it says, well, gosh, if you're a doctor, then you don't get free speech. You have different speech than everybody else. I don't remember reading those Orwellian things either. And that's what's so bizarre about this is, in a public forum, am I practicing medicine? Absolutely not. I'm teaching, I'm sharing, my opinion. It takes a doctor and a patient to be practicing medicine. So they're making this accusation. And again, I think you've perceived this and so many other people have perceived this so correctly. This is free speech. And this is the bigger issue here. I'm kind of the fall guy for a lot of my colleagues. And so, we're going to continue fighting this all the way through the appellate courts in Washington up to the Supreme Court and take it to the federal level. It's going to have to go that way. But when there's no patient involved and they don't like what you're saying, now we have a constitutional issue. This has nothing to do with medicine.
Well, they came after you in 2023. This is, 3 years after the beginning of this mess. Why? Why? Because are you even still practicing?
Well, technically, no. That same doctor who ran the health system, his insurance payer plan canceled my lab contract, which was the beginning of the end of my lab. So I had to sell my lab to my young associate, kind of fire sale my career after 26 years of a wonderful career in which I had up to that point, zero patient complaints, and all the way through 3 years of COVID, I have zero COVID patient complaints. So, technically I'm not even practicing. And it was fascinating because my attorney talked to their attorney and they said, well, if he'll just admit to this, and this in terms of, I don't know if I can say the drug that shall not be named anymore on YouTube or,
but you can say the name, you just can't say anything nice about it.
Okay. So, but if you'll admit, they wanted me to make like 4 scientific statements that I knew were overtly false. And I'm like, no, I have too much integrity to make that statement. And I won't, the real science, not Science Inc. or Scientism. I'm like, I looked at that and I'm like, no, I'm not going to sign that because, we'll make it go away if you'll make these 4 statements. I'm like, no, that would be false statements. And I refuse, my integrity won't allow me to do that because on behalf of patients, I don't want them to be afraid or scared because now somebody else is kowtowing to the establishment. So I said, let's fight this out in your legal proceeding, which we did last week, which was, again, dystopian is the only word that keeps coming to mind. It was very Orwellian, kind of Ayn Rand, you name it. It was just all of them kind of woven together.
Why so?
Well, just because the way, well, number one, okay, I have a background in, I did PhD work in virology, immunology, boarded in anatomic and clinical pathology. This whole couple of years is my area of expertise. So Dystopia, number one, they bring a psychiatrist, addiction specialist as one of their experts. And then she, says, well, everything has to be a double-blind, placebo-controlled trial, and if not, the paper's no good. And I just watched how corrupted the medical literature has been over the last couple of years. I know Dr. Corey talks about this, but they can't read the literature. So to have a psychiatrist sit there trying to teach me about virology and showing me where I'm wrong, that was dystopian. And then there's another panel member who's a family doctor, and she said, well, why did you treat patients in Washington? I'm like, well, it was the height of the pandemic. Nobody else would treat them. Everybody else was being told, go home till your lips turn blue. I did 4 years of emergency medicine, 3 years of family medicine, 3 years in dermatology clinics. I'm a clinician at heart, not just a pathologist. I'm like, well, patient focused, I'm going to treat patients. When nobody else is going to treat a patient in the middle of this scary pandemic that we're going through, supposedly, then patients need help, and if their doctors are going to deny them. So, I got attacked for using the drugs that shall not be named with patients that did incredibly well on those drugs, and no patient complained. That's the other thing is, this same Chihuahua doctor, has bit my ankles in every state that he can, but all the other states have dropped the complaints. They're like, look, there's no merit here. This is what's fascinating about Washington is all these other states have looked at this and said, this is all political. Where's the patient complaint? Where's the patient harm? There isn't any. Even in Washington, there's no patient complaint, no patient harm. So all the other states are like, this is political. We're not getting involved in politics until a patient comes forward with an actual provable harm, then forget about it. But Washington did just the opposite. They did what you pointed out. They said, this is different speech than we like, so we better regulate speech.
Can you believe, Dr. Cole, that Bob Ferguson, the Attorney General in Washington, just tweeted this morning, he's running for governor. He's probably one of the leading candidates next to my old boss who fired me over my podcast. So it's great choices there in Washington. But he tweeted this morning how, basically they help stop the anti-LGBTQAI plus takedown of a particular library in Washington. And he said, if I win governor or when I'm governor, I will stand up against censorship. And I'm like, I wrote back, I'm like, Bob, I'm trying to remember like the one lawsuit you filed on behalf of all the people in Washington state who have been censored over the last few years. Like, did I miss something? I mean, I don't know. Maybe he was too busy suing Trump because he did love to do that too when Trump was president. And, I had one of his former employees actually on talking about how she was fired over the vaccine, even though she's like sending money to her family in the Ukraine, which Bob Ferguson has said he's a huge champion of, like, help Ukraine. But then he has an employee who's like sending money to her family in Ukraine. He's like, yeah, but you didn't get the shot. So you gotta. Anyway, I've heard like all this crazy stuff about how his office specifically, and this shouldn't surprise anybody, it's like this everywhere. AG's offices are very highly politicized, but Washington is. And that's one thing I've thought of, like, as I've considered whether I want to sue my old agency for what they did over First Amendment violations, because I know Washington State is exactly what you describe. I mean, it's not going to be a pro First Amendment friendly judicial environment. And so, big picture, what do you think about this idea that people are talking about more and more, which is this standard of care, which is what they're saying you violated? It's such a obtuse term. I mean, what does it even, it can mean anything. And even if you were practicing medicine, like you're saying, I'm not practicing medicine when I'm out making a tweet or I'm on a podcast, but what if you were? I mean, why can't you, if like you said, you don't have a patient complaint, why can't you do what you were doing? Like, we're hearing from these doctors, for instance, that prescribe, again, like you said, this drug that no one's allowed to say. And the pharmacies are being supported in denying patients their medicine. Like, that's so crazy to me that would happen.
Yeah, none of it makes sense, really. And of course, that drug, in the Fifth Appellate Court, federal court, the attorney for the FDA said, "Oh, of course, doctors can use that drug." So that's on the legal record now. So if Washington comes with any sanctions, and again, none of these patients complained. In fact, they wouldn't cooperate with the commission because they were grateful for the care they received. But your question about standard of care, it is nebulous, state to state to state. I was meeting the telehealth early treatment doctor standard of care. And see that, and this is where, I'm willing to throw most of the medical profession under the bus on this one, because they all chickened out and they said, there's nothing we can do. Nothing we can do. I'm like, let's see. We have a virus that's a clotting disease, an inflammatory disease, causes trouble breathing. Do we have drugs that can treat clotting? Sure do. Do we have drugs that can treat inflammation? Well, for eons, we've had those. Do we have drugs that we can use to assist in breathing? Of course we do. And yet the doctors around, not just the country, but the world, are like, oh no, we've got nothing. There's nothing we can do. And so the standard of care I was meeting was those doctors that were willing to step up and treat early. And then the other thing too that I find this hilarious is then they tried to pick apart my chart notes, And, it was electronic charting, and there's not, okay. And I'll kind of throw it back at this commission. Show me one randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trial determining whether the length of a note a doctor does or doesn't write changes the outcome in terms of the patient's care. And there's no evidence of that. So I write shorter notes than other people. Some people waste their time writing a novella. I spend my time treating the patient. The patients did great and wouldn't cooperate with Washington because they were grateful. Same thing in other states. This is the problem, is these boards actually will go after the patients once they open the can of worms of a complaint, which were all these political complaints. Then they can start demanding these things of you, and their demands are exceedingly unreasonable. They wanted like every chart note for every patient and every diagnosis of mine for the last 20 years. I'm like, no. They become a harassing organization because that's what tax dollars go, is to get these people to do busy work. And but anyway, going back to the standard of care, I met the standard of care. Patients won't complain because patients are grateful, and so they have to have something. They want their pound of flesh in some way, shape, or form. And so instead of this, that, or the other, they're going to say, well, we're going to be your English teacher now, and we're going to say that you should have put a comma here on this chart, and you should have used one more word, or you should have done this. And it's really nitpicking. It's, I don't know, incomprehensible at this point that this is what our world has become. And I think this is the weaponization of our legal system. It is lawfare against free speech, and it's lawfare against people that care. I mean, if I had harmed someone, great, come after me, and then the assistant AG from Washington, well, and Dr. Cole, moral turpitude, this, that, and the other. I'm like, moral turpitude? My goodness. In her closing statements, I'm thinking, okay, never had a patient complain. Why in the world? It would be one thing if I were a disabled physician or out there doing, all these creepy things that you can read in statute. And I look at this and go, okay, I'm a guy that loves my community, loves my patients, loves my little farm, loves my family. And, all I've ever done is give, give, give. And then you get attacked by the powers that be. And again, I think you pointed this out with many a guest, is how upside down world all of this really is, in terms of, we haven't seen this type of behavior before or maybe we haven't been aware of this type of behavior from these types of agencies.
Mhm.
But I think it's been an unfortunate enlightenment.
There was a doctor I covered, a naturopath in the Seattle area in 2017, maybe 16, 17, somewhere around there, I think. Maybe even earlier than that. And the Department of Health came after him for experimenting on his patients. At the time, I totally took that hook, line, and sinker. I mean, I was just one of those reporters who thought the Department of Health was here to protect us. And we did the live shot outside his office in the dark. No statement from him, of course, because they send the press release out at 5 o'clock at night or just before it. And, we didn't get a comment before we ran the story. Cause why? That's just the way we did things. And I'm ashamed really, like that's where I came from, but that's how I learned. And I finally started to wake up to realize that the whole manipulation of these government agencies of journalists is like part of how this all works, and how we have these massive communications teams that taxpayers are funding, not to give taxpayers like FOIA requests or public records information or anything, but to spin a narrative for a particular, whether elected or unelected official in these agencies. And I think the communication teams are a total mess, having been on one myself. That said, I know, going back to him, when I finally interviewed his patients, which is one of those moments that really woke me up to this, that they did this years before. But what COVID did, I think, was it greased the wheels for this to scale up in really like an industrialized way. It has become like a factory of and easy to do now. Like, whereas before, you might have had to really prove your case, and you might get some journalists asking some really tough questions, maybe. I mean, I did finally after I interviewed the patients about this guy. But I think now it just made it so much easier to just go after doctors for nothing other than, you're saying standard of care protects patients, but really it's just weaponized politics. And it's it's really weird. I mean, that like people have to be so secretive about who they're going to see, and what
Yeah.
they're taking, and that especially like the journalists still, just like I did. I mean, it's on such a massive scale now, unless you're somebody who's really trying hard, or like you really woke up to this. It's so easy to work in these newsrooms and never see anybody like you, because you're just, it's just like whack-a-mole. They just rip you out, and they use this standard of care as a reason to do so. And then even the people who are like, they're borderline, they might change their mind. The journalists might wake up and see that this could lead us to a really dark place, or already has. Like, it's just, they don't have to see it. And I just think it existed before, but they were more careful about who they went after, because they would have had to have had, I think, more proof, or more, they knew that there was going to be a fight. Whereas now it's just, they could just be bullies. There's nobody to fight back anymore. I think that's the difference. Not necessarily the content itself, but just the scale of it.
And I think you're absolutely right. And I think that's why it's so important on whatever scale one finds themselves, to stand up to it. I think the bullying is obviously overt at this point, but the number of people waking up, thankfully, is more and more each day, thanks to independent media, to what you do, what many others do out there now, telling the truth and telling the stories of those who are going through, these battles like this. If we all just sat in a corner and said, okay, I'm not going to fight, then we all lose in the long run. So this is why it's so important to get all the information. And this is one thing that frustrated me with the hearing, is that anytime I tried to bring some additional science or a new paper, they're like, well, that wasn't in your submissions or whatever. I said, well, it's because since the time you guys accused me of this, we have even more information. And I've never, during all these 3 years, I've never said, well, I'm right and you're wrong. I've said, look, if you have better data, bring it. Let's have a discussion on behalf of patients. And so that's been my approach to science, and always has been. I'm here to learn. And when you share certain points of view that are unpopular or whatnot, it's really shameful that we have a medical profession that just sits on their hands silently, talking, in similarity to, those big newsrooms. It's the same thing in these big hospitals. Everybody gets into the same narrative, but if you speak out, you're in trouble. I mean, if we go back to Ignaz Semmelweis, discovering that hand washing worked back in the 1800s in Austria, and it took 30 years for the medical establishment to acknowledge that he was right. And it's this kind of thing. And there's so many advances that we do make in medicine, or understandings of actual harms, that I think we'll talk about maybe on the other channel, but knowing there are actual harms, and not having your colleagues even tune in. And I think you've experienced that in your profession as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Nobody in the mainstream world that I came from has been interested. They weren't interested at all in the story of my getting fired from the Department of Natural Resources, nor are they interested in the fact that one of the videos that led to that, is now part of what's, keeps bouncing back and forth between the Fifth Circuit and the Supreme Court, but is likely going to end up being finally decided by the Supreme Court. I mean, it's like 2-time Emmy award-winning journalist, part of our world, gets ripped off the internet, fired from her job, part of a Supreme Court case, like crickets, just crickets. Like, they just don't care, So like, anyway,
national news in every newsroom, because whatever happens to you can happen to them.
You'd think. But that's what this has all taught me, is that it's taught me that what we often did in the news business was protect ourselves. So whatever we felt, whether we were conscious of this or not, whatever we felt was an existential threat, we projected and made an existential threat for other people. So Trump scares us, we're going to scare you about Trump or whatever it was at, it is at the time. We're scared of COVID. Then we want you vaccinated. So we're going to tell you to go get vaccinated. We're going to do clinic at the morning show. You're going to be standing outside his clinics and do it as like a fun morning show. Never give you informed consent about what you're doing or anything. Brian Stelter telling people, pressuring people to post their vaccine selfies on Instagram. And, if you're a journalist who hasn't done that, then you're not serving the public good. And so what it has taught me is that the reason that they're probably not concerned is because they don't feel like they're saying anything that's going to be putting them in this same situation. I mean, that's to me, that's what I take away from it, is that they're not scared that they're going to lose their jobs. They're not scared that they're going to lose their First Amendment freedoms. They're not scared that there's an attack on them because whatever they're saying isn't bothering anybody in power at the end of the day.
Exactly right.
Anyway, okay, I want to take some questions for you from locals. Don't forget, everybody, go to AlisonMorrow.locals.com. You can be part of my editorial board for $5 a month, and for $5 a month, which is like pennies a day, you can go one-on-one with the most censored people on the internet, like Dr. Cole, and it's a great value. You get an exclusive media analysis show, Tittle Tattle, I do with my friend who is also in television news once a week. So go consider joining over there. It's a great way to support my work. Also, don't forget, you can get some great wine, AlisonWinePromo.com. It's a great way to befriend grandma after all the terrible things you all said to each other over the last couple of years. She did this, you did that, you voted for this, she voted for that, whatever. You're going to forget about it over some high altitude Malbec. So go get your high elevation extremist altitude wine from Argentina at AlisonWinePromo.com. 50% off the wine, 50% off shipping, small batches, natural fermentation, no filtration. Can't get it at the grocery store. Why would you want to? Grapes at 9,000 feet. What elevation are you at, Dr. Cole?
We're about 3,000 feet where I am, but okay. I can do your whole wine ad in Argentine Spanish, si quiere.
You can?
Yo viví en Buenos Aires hace muchos años, y si quiere el vino de la tierra de sol y buen vino, bueno, de Mendoza y de los Andes, es el vino para ti.
Okay, read this one right here.
Is basically what I said.
Right here.
I love Argentina. I lived there, and those are good Malbecs. Those are great.
Oh, awesome. Okay, read this one. A never before imported 92-point Malbec. Can you read this one right in Spanish?
Nunca antes importado 92 puntos Malbec de 8,200 pies de altura de Argentina, de una vinca muy vieja, más que 200 años, de una familia con una tradición, producido por mano, con muchas aclamaciones. No se puede conseguir en ningún otro lugar. There you go.
I can't fact check that one, but I will say this. I'm not sure if this joke is going to land, but with all the people coming over the border right now, I might have a whole new audience. So I got to make sure I translate into Spanish in case people coming over the border want some AlisonWinePromo.com. Okay. All right. One other quick pitch too. You guys like superfood powder. This is a great way to support my work too. Go to fieldofgreens.com and use Alison as your promo code. You get 15% off your first order. Fruits and vegetables for the day in just 2 scoops, organic. They're flash frozen and ground up. They use the whole fruit and vegetable, not just extracts. And, if your garden's on its way out, like Dr. Cole is going into winter here in Florida, I don't know what we're going into. Like, we're supposed to get down to the 60s this weekend. We'll see. My garden hates me, so that's another reason I take this product. It's very good. It tastes good, and it's a great way to get some vitamins in your system if your garden is dying like mine is, not because of weather, just because you're a terrible gardener. And then finally, get yourself some. This is all, you might be able to translate this for me too, but we got some coffee here at twinenginecoffee.com/Alison, twinenginecoffee.com/Alison. It's high altitude, also Nicaraguan roasts. We got light roast, dark roast, organic also, and espresso and Katura tea. So if you're a tea drinker, go check out that as well. twinenginecoffee.com/Alison. I got a bunch of affiliate sponsors in the link. So if you want to just shop for whatever product, most of it's health related or alcohol. Coffee. Go check those out. Okay. I am going to the Wise Traditions Conference in Kansas City in a couple of weeks. You want to support the budget to get there. It's the foodie conference to end all foodie conferences, the Weston A. Price Foundation. So if you want to support my work over there, there's going to be a lot of amazing speakers: Naomi Wolf, Catherine Austin Fitz, Dr. Tom Cowan, a bunch of interesting people. And you can put in questions ahead of time too if you're on my editorial board. So everybody's getting ready for that. Okay, Dr. Cole, let's go to we're going to see you guys on YouTube. We're going to see you on the other platforms. Thanks for watching. You know the drill. I don't have to tell you why we're doing this. See you over there. Oh, Dr. Cole, wait, before we quit YouTube, how can people find you, and where should they support you if they want to?
Okay, rcolemd.com is my website. And then Dr. Kat Lindley put together, Give, Send, Go, and PayPal, and these things these days are awfully hard to get your funds. So she set up one called givebutter.com. I'll probably have to send you the link. It's through a nonprofit, but they're helping me with the legal fight all the way through the federal courts. And so it's I've spent tens of thousands and tens of thousands of my daughter's educational money and our family money just defending my licenses against the ankle nippers. So both at my website, there's a donate page, but also givebutter.com. I'll have to send you the link just because I don't have it in front of me right now because I don't go donating to myself. But Kat Lindley, Dr. Kat Lindley set it up. It's through the Pandemic Health Alliance, and it's to help support Dr. Cole's legal battles.
I think I can find that while we're talking. So I will look for that after I ask you the next question. Okay, everybody, see you on the other platforms.